Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time we're going to take a look at this, the HiFive Premier P550. This is a RISC-V development board from SiFive, who are the company set up in Silicon Valley by the inventors of RISC-V. In case you're not in the know, RISC-V is a free and open ISA, or instruction set architecture, that provides an alternative to the closed ISAs used in today's x86 and ARM processors. And so what we have here is another example of how RISC-V is progressing toward becoming a true competitor to ARM and x86 in end-user and server computing. And indeed, what I have here is the most powerful piece of RISC-V hardware I've ever tested. Just before we begin, I want to make it clear that SiFive have loaned me this board to review. I'll be returning it to them when filming is complete. So, this is not sponsored content, and with that hopefully clear, let's go and take a closer look. Right, here we have our HiFive Premier P550, which has an SoC with 4 SiFive P550 RISC-V cores. The board is just becoming available to developers and other RISC-V pioneers. These are very early days with this hardware, and it can be purchased with either 16 or 32 GB of RAM. This is the 16 GB model, which costs $399, whilst the 32 GB model costs $499. Note that these prices are lower than previously announced and have been confirmed to me by SiFive. So let's open it up. Very exciting unboxing. New piece of RISC-V hardware. Oh, a piece of cardboard. And aha! Look at this. This is our board. Let's take that bit out there like that. Never quite know which way to go. Oh dear, I've covered it up. Never mind. It's back again. And obviously in the bag. And can I just get straight into this? Will it just come up? It will. Crinkle, crinkle. And here we are. What an exciting piece of hardware. This looks very exciting indeed. And let's just check what else is in the box. We had something, I think, underneath. Looks like it, doesn't it? There's something under here. And what is in here? Various extra bits, I imagine. Let's get them out. And they are, is that everything? No. There is an I/O shield. And we have various leads, standoffs, etc. So let's go back to the board itself. Here it is. And I'll give you a closer shot. And as we can see, the configuration here is a SOM, a system on a module that's plugged into a carrier board. And the SOM contains the system on a chip, the RAM, and 128 GB of Samsung eMMC flash storage, all of which is currently hidden under the cooler. And then the carrier board into which the SOM is plugged gives us lots of standard PC connectivity, and it's got a mini DTX form factor. And if you're wondering, mini DTX is slightly bigger than mini ITX, as it is 8 by 6.7 inches in size rather than being 6.7 inches square. Although do not fear, this board will fit just fine on my new mini ITX open rig. Right, I've now removed the cooler so we can get a better look at the SOM, at the heart of which is an Eswin EIC7700X SoC with 4 1.4 GHz SiFive performance P550 cores. There's also an Imagination AXM8256 GPU that offers up to 8K video decoding, although this is currently not supported in software. And the SoC also has a 20 TOPS NPU, although this too does currently not have software support. Also on the SOM, we have here our 16 GB of low-power DDR5 RAM, and down here we have got 128 GB of Samsung eMMC flash storage, on which Ubuntu 24.04 is pre-installed. Turning to the carrier board, on the back edge we find a microSD card slot, two 1 gigabit Ethernet connectors and a full-size HDMI 2.0 connector. Next to these we have two Type A USB 3.2 Gen 1 connectors, 3.5mm audio jacks and a third Ethernet port which is connected to an onboard MCU and used for remote board management. And next to this there's then a Type C USB connector which offers USB 2.0 connectivity for terminal interface and debugging. Rotating 90, on the next edge we find a 4-lane PCIe 3.0 connector which is provided in a x16 slot, so allowing PCIe cards of all sizes to be fitted. We also have some JTAG headers, a front audio header, a front panel connector, and we've got 4 buttons. And these are for power, for SoC reset, and then for recovery and reset for the MCU. Finally, there's a dip switch for boot selection and a real-time clock battery socket for a CR1220 cell. Turning the corner, we next find a connector for 2 more USB 3.0 ports and a Type E connector for a front panel USB Type-C port. There are then 2 chassis fan connectors, a SATA 3 connector and a 24-pin ATX power connector. And then on the end there's a 12-volt barrel jack for factory use. Taking a final rotation, we find a main power slide switch, the header for the SoC cooler and a 40-pin GPIO header. And then behind that we have got an M.2 slot which is E-keyed to take a wireless module. Lastly, if we flip the board over, here we go, I'm sure it won't mind, there we are. Under here we find 6 ribbon cable connectors that don't appear in the specification. And I've checked with SiFive and they are MIPI, CSI and DSI connectors which were designed into the board as potential options for future use cases, although there were no active plans to enable these at this time. And so there we are, the HiFive Premier P550. And just in case you're wondering, there isn't an M.2 slot that can take an NVMe SSD, but we do have the SATA port and the 128GB eMMC flash storage. Talking of which, as I mentioned earlier, this comes with Ubuntu 24.04 pre-installed, which is what we're now going to test. Right, I've now got everything connected up. As you can see, I've even fitted a real-time clock battery. So let's turn on the power supply, like that, turn on the switch down here, and in theory, if we press the power button, yes, the board is coming to life. And in theory, we're going to boot straight into Ubuntu. Nothing yet on the screen, but who knows what's about to happen. There we are, things are happening. Very exciting. And we have our menu. We'll select Ubuntu. Things definitely happening now. Oh, the fan on the board's getting quite excited. Always very interesting booting up a brand new board, isn't it? We're entering new territory, a new RISC-V computer. And here we are, entering Ubuntu. Brilliant. Let's enter on that. The password I think is Ubuntu, if I'm right. And we have to change our password immediately. There we are, my new password is set. And here we are, running Ubuntu 24.04 on the HiFive Premier P550. And this will be the standard Ubuntu opening gambit. We will skip that for now. We will share, why not? And there we are. It's working. I'm impressed with this. This is very exciting indeed. Let's just click on application to see how rapidly it comes up. That's not bad. So I think what I'm now going to do is to have a look around, apply a bit of scaling, and I'll come back to you after that. Greetings! Here I am back again. I've now been testing out this system for several hours and I can report it is certainly more fluid than any previous RISC-V system I've tested. And it's also great to have the current long-term support release of Ubuntu on RISC-V development hardware. I've also got a power meter connected, which shows us currently we're using 15.4 watts of energy, although this figure will clearly depend on what power supply you're using, how efficient it is, etc. Let's just go around the system and give you a bit of a feel of the responsiveness. Bringing up a terminal here, let's do an LS CPU, which tells us not much about the CPU, to be honest. It tells us it's RISC-V with 4 cores. So let's also look in system details up here at similar information. A little bit of a lag, but things are not too bad, as you can see. Let's just go to about over here and system details. Again, no processor information, but we can see our GPU. We're definitely running Ubuntu, well, we're obviously running Ubuntu with the X11 windowing system. Let's launch LibreOffice Writer. I always like to run a standard end user application to see how responsive it is, and this one works pretty well. There we are, almost there. You can do it. There it is. Let's type hello, as I always do, and make it very large, as is the law. Working fine. You can see this system is pretty responsive. Let's also bring up the system monitor. Leaping around with the mouse, etc. Or with the pointer anyway. And here we are. Our 4 cores. Things happily going along. And I'm going to leave that there because I'm sure you also want to see browser performance. So let's launch the Firefox web browser. It'll come up in a second. We can see it's stressing our CPU cores a bit as it comes up. And this is loading in 2 pages. First of all, explaining computers, where you can learn about things like RISC-V. And it's also loading in the Christopher Barnett YouTube channel. And whilst this takes a second to come in, it comes in far more fluidly, far more rapidly than on any other RISC-V system I've used. This is quite a good browsing experience in RISC-V. And let's play this video. And let's bring that up. And do we have to skip through an advert? We do have to skip through an advert. Let's do that. There we are. It has gone. And we will full screen this. And we will bring up Stats for Nerds. And I'm going to set it to play in 720p. Remember, as I said earlier, we do not yet have GPU accelerated video decoding on this system. We don't have software support for that for the GPU. So everything here is happening using the CPU. And it's not bad. I know some people will say, well, we can play 4K video on other computers with the x86 ARM processors. You can, but that's not the point. We're evaluating where RISC-V is going. And this isn't too bad at all. This is playing 720p video using the CPU pretty well. Oh, look, we've got little ducklings as well. This is working quite nicely. So let's just close that down, and we can see that the processor cores were stressed out quite a lot doing that, and they peaked energy use, power use at about 18.4 watts. But I think this is now enough for this segment of the video, because I now want to connect some more hardware so we can do some storage tests. Well, I've now fitted some more hardware, as you can see, and specifically a Samsung Evo SATA SSD and a PCIe to M.2 adapter card, which is fitted with a P3 NVMe SSD. And if we go across to the desktop, we can see that lots of SSDs have now appeared. They're clearly mounted, so things are clearly being recognized. And if we launch the terminal, here we go. Let's start off actually with an LSPCI, see how things are there. We can see it's clearly detected the NVMe SSD. And let's just clear that and do an LSBLK, list block devices. And we can see all of this lovely storage on the system. Our SATA SSD, our internal eMMC, and the NVMe drive. So let's do some storage tests, and we'll start with the internal eMMC. Here we go. This is the 128 gigabyte Samsung eMMC on the board. What speed is this going to give us? 212 megabytes a second. Let's do it another time as well, give it a proper chance. Is that what it's going to get? These things can vary. And we'll take the best. That's pretty consistent, isn't it? 212 megabytes a second. So let's do the SATA SSD, which is a SDA. Remember, this is a SATA 3 port. Doesn't mean necessarily I will get that kind of speed. Should be 500-ish megabytes a second if it was full speed. 382, that's not too bad actually. That's a pretty respectable result. And then the result I'm most interested in is the NVMe SSD. And I've not tested this yet, so I have no idea what this result is going to be. NVMe 0N1. And remember, on this board, the PCIe slot is PCIe 3.0 4-lane. And the adapter card in it is actually a PCIe 4.0 card, so that's not going to be a bottleneck. And the NVMe drive we've got fitted is PCIe 3.0, also 4-lane. So in theory, we should get the full speed of the drive. I doubt we will. I doubt we'll get towards 3000 megabytes a second, but we'll see. Anyway, let's see what the result is. Very exciting. And what are we going to get? 563 megabytes a second. Again, I'm going to do it twice just to be really certain that's the sort of speed we have. And come on, give us a result. 490, it's got worse. Is it going to get better? Shows the variability of these tests, doesn't it? But there we are. Let's just do it for a little time. And what? 563 megabytes a second. I think I believe that now. So there we are. We've tested the speed of different drives connected to this RISC-V system. Earlier, I said that the HiFive Premier P550 is the most powerful RISC-V hardware I've ever tested. So let's prove this by benchmarking its performance against the Milk-V Jupiter, which I recently reviewed. The Jupiter is based on a SpaceMit M1 system on a chip with 8 1.8 GHz SpaceMit X60 cores. So let's see how this compares to the HiFive Premier P550 with its Eswin EIC7700X SoC with its 4 1.4 GHz SiFive P550 cores. Note that whilst here on the Premier P550 we're running Ubuntu 24.04, on the Milk-V Jupiter, the Linux distro is Bamboo OS 1.0, which is optimized for the hardware and based on Ubuntu 23.10. As usual, I'm going to focus on real-world performance rather than artificial benchmarks. So back here on the Premier P550, I've installed a few applications, including Inkscape and GIMP and Critter and Kdenlive. Although sadly I can't get Kdenlive to run as I have on some other RISC-V boards. But if we go to Critter, this really impresses me because look, I can draw, I can paint in Critter. Let's just change the colour and do a little bit more. That's very exciting. This is very, very fluid. And this really impresses me because if we go across to the Milk-V Jupiter, we can run up Critter, here it is, but it is so slow it is unusable. You'll notice we can't see the cursor here at the moment. We can't see where we'll be drawing because it's taking so long to put it there. Let's just wait a second to see if it appears. There it is. I'll try and draw something like that. I have just drawn something. It hasn't appeared yet. So it is very clear we don't need numbers for this test, that Critter works on the HiFive Premier P550. Oh look, there's our stroke. It is unusable on the Milk-V Jupiter. So clearly the Premier P550 is giving us much better performance. If we return to the Premier P550 and we run up GIMP, sitting down there it is, you'll see it comes up pretty quickly with its familiar mushrooms on GIMP 210. In fact, it comes up pretty fast, doesn't it? That's pretty good. And GIMP is very usable on this system. It's also usable on a Milk-V Jupiter, but it's not quite so fast. So let's run my standard GIMP filter test. We go to Filters and Render and Lava, like that. And as usual, we'll bring up our two systems on test side by side and use the magic of filmmaking to start them both at the same point in time. And both machines have leapt with great abandon into the race. They both want to win, but I think we know which one is going to win. You never know, there could be some strange thing happens in the wonderful world of RISC-V computing at the cutting edge as we are, but it's not likely, and no, the HiFive Premier P550 has won on 18.3 seconds. So let's speed forward in time to let the Jupiter complete, and there we are, it has finished in 42.6 seconds. So clearly the HiFive Premier P550 is a much more powerful RISC-V board. Next, I wanted to compare the performance of SiFive P550 and Spacebit X60 processor cores using Sysbench. However, as you'll see if I press enter here, there is no installation candidate for Sysbench for RISC-V. And so instead, I thought we'd do a timed file compression of a file, specifically this file here, which is about 1/4 gigabyte in size. It's an MP4 file, it won't compress very much, but that really doesn't matter for the purposes of the test. And to start, I've got this set up on the Milk 5 Jupiter. And do note that the basic zip function in Linux is single core only, so here we are pitting one SpaceMit 1.8 GHz X60 core against one 1.4 GHz SiFive P550. And just so you're clear, we're compressing a file stored on a USB drive that I'm inserting into each computer in turn, so different storage media and interfaces should not influence the test. So let's bring up a clock and press enter. There we go, and once again we'll accelerate time, and there is our result. The Milk 5 Jupiter has zipped the file in 49.3 seconds. So let's come back to the HiFive Premier P550. Here we are, hello, same test setup, so we will run the test, and again speed on through, and this time the result is much closer, as we can see. Although the 1.4 GHz SiFive P550 core has still beaten the 1.8 GHz SpaceMit X60. And if we have a summary of the 3 rounds of our contest, it is very clear that the HiFive Premier P550 is the winner. So there we are, the HiFive Premier P550. Which, as we've just seen, is the most powerful RISC-V computer I've ever tested. And I suspect we're going to be seeing a lot more of its Eswin EIC7700X SoC with its SiFive P550 cores in 2025. And I look forward to following the further development and success of RISC-V Edge and desktop computing. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.